Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan John.
And I'm Haim Kaur on the show today. Weeks of talks towards a ceasefire brought no results yet, but international mediators continue talks towards a truce between Israel and Hamas. President Joe Biden has said that the United States is working to negotiate a ceasefire of at least 6 weeks in the Gaza Strip as part of a wider deal that would also involve the release of all hostages. While France has delivered a written proposal to Beirut aimed at ending hostilities with Israel and settling the disputed Lebanon-Israel frontier. We'll of course explore this on the show.
Also on World DNA, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will kick off his West Asia tour later today. He will be visiting the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Apart from a bilateral meeting with the U.A.E. president, he will inaugurate the first Hindu temple of the region and also participate in the World Government Summit, which he is attending as the guest of honor.
Also on the show, we will have with us our correspondent Susan Terani, who will be getting us all the updates from New York. Later on the show, we will be joined by Alison LaGrange, getting us all the updates from the world of entertainment.
All this and a lot more right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the headlines.
President Joe Biden says the United States is working to negotiate a ceasefire of at least 6 weeks in the Gaza Strip that will also include the release of hostages. Comments made after meeting Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House.
France has delivered a written proposal to Lebanon aiming to end hostilities on its border with Israel. Document accessed by Reuters says Paris has suggested Hezbollah withdraw its elite unit 10 kilometers from the border with Israel.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to arrive in the U.A.E. later today on an official visit. He will attend the inauguration of the BAPS temple and participate in the government summit.
Security tightened at Delhi borders in view of the farmers' march. Talks between government and farmer leaders on Monday night. Union Minister Arjun Manda assures government wants to reach a solution.
Sources tell WION that Nawaz Sharif's PMLN offered the Prime Minister position to Bilawal Bhutto's PPP with the caveat that the PMLN will take some of the key ministries. The ministries have not been defined yet. Now, Israelis welcomed the rescue of 2 Gaza hostages on Monday.
Well, fears of a looming ground incursion grew among over 1 million Palestinians who were trapped in the war-ravaged territories densely crowded far south.
International mediators, they've continued working towards a truce and a hostage-prisoner exchange. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said only continued military pressure until complete victory will result in the release of all hostages.
President Joe Biden said that the U.S. is working to negotiate a ceasefire of at least 6 weeks in the Gaza Strip as part of a wider deal that would also involve the release of hostages. Listen to this.
The United States is working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which would bring an immediate and sustained period of calm to Gaza for at least 6 weeks, which we could then take the time to build something more enduring.
However, Jordan's King Abdullah II appealed for a full ceasefire to end the Gaza war. After talks with Joe Biden, he struck a discordant note with the U.S. president, who, as mentioned, is seeking a shorter 6-week pause to give Israel time to defeat Hamas.
We cannot afford an Israeli attack on Rafah. It is certain to produce another humanitarian catastrophe. The situation is already unbearable for over 1 million people who have been pushed into Rafah since the war started. We cannot stand by and let this continue. We need a lasting ceasefire now. This war must end.
Weeks of talks towards a ceasefire have brought no results yet. Israel says around 130 hostages are still held in Gaza, including 29 presumed dead. The Hostages and Missing Families Forums warned that time is running out for the remaining hostages. The campaign urged the group urged the Israeli government to exhaust every option on the table to release them.
Netanyahu has vowed to send ground troops into Rafah, where about 1.4 million displaced Palestinians are struggling to survive in shelters and tent camps. Aid groups and foreign governments have voiced deep concern over the potentially disastrous consequences of expanding operations in Rafah. They say it would worsen an already dire humanitarian situation. EU has also expressed concern over the situation here.
They are going to evacuate. Where? To the moon? Where are they going to evacuate these people? So if the international community believes that this is a slaughter, that too many people are being killed, maybe they have to think about the provision of arms.
Now, a Dutch court ruled the Netherlands must stop delivering US-owned F-35 parts to Israel. The court cited a clear risk the fighter jets would be involved in international law violations.
European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has slammed lip service from the US president and called on Biden to stop giving munition support to its ally.
Borrell made these remarks in response to Biden's statement last week, which said that Israel's military action was quote-unquote over the top.
Meanwhile, France has delivered a written proposal to Beirut aimed at ending hostilities with Israel and settling the disputed Lebanon-Israel frontier.
As per news agency Reuters, the proposal calls for fighters, including Hezbollah's elite unit, to withdraw about 10 kilometers from the border. And the plan aims to end fighting between the Iran-backed Hezbollah and Israel at the border. The hostilities have run parallel to the Gaza war and are fueling concerns of a ruinous, all-out confrontation.
All right, for more on this, we are now joined by Mr. Alen Burin, who is a professor at the Israel Institute Fellow. He's a fellow of the Institute, Department of Political Science, joining us live on World DNA. I wanted to get to this right away, Mr. Burin. Now, at all levels of negotiations, we see a discord. The US president is aiming for a 6-week ceasefire at the minimum. But again, we saw a discordant note there. Jordan's king, of course, has not agreed to appealing for a full ceasefire. And that is essentially what has happened on that front. If we look at the other front between France and Lebanon, again, Lebanon does not want to concede, given the fact that Israel still continues to bomb Rafah. Do you feel any of this materializing until Israel stops?
So first of all, it depends on who are the actors that we're talking about, because Jordan is making a lot of statements, and their statements have been very consistent. Their statements have been that, in fact, there needs to be a complete ceasefire. But Jordan is not even a part of the negotiating team. The negotiating team on the hostage deals that may bring about a truce or a ceasefire are Israel, the United States, Qatar, and Egypt, who are speaking on behalf of Hamas. So Jordan makes a lot of statements, and they've been very consistent about that, but they don't really have a lot of weight in the war. What the United States says has more weight. What Qatar or Egypt say have more weight. I think what President Biden, the reason he's sticking to the 6-week limit right now is because he's being realistic. Realistically speaking, Israel is not going to agree to a complete ceasefire. That would be the end of Netanyahu's government and Netanyahu's vow to complete the war. So I think what Biden hopes is, let's start with 6 weeks. Maybe that can then lead us to something greater. But he's being realistic because he knows if he says a complete ceasefire, Israel will slam the door in his face and not even show up for negotiations, probably.
Right, sir. Now, just on that note, I also wanted to understand the United States. It seems confident that the ongoing Israeli incursion in Rafah, that will not have any bearing on the negotiations. However, do you think there can be any progress on that front as long as Israel continues with its operations on ground?
I think the United States is being optimistic on that, and I'm not sure that they're right, to be perfectly honest. Hamas has openly said that if the IDF invades Rafah, they're going to walk out of negotiations. Egypt has openly said that if the IDF invades Rafah, that is going to endanger the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. So I think the United States, all they're trying to do is to be optimistic and say, just keep working. They want the sides to keep working together in hopes of getting somewhere. Realistically speaking, though, Hamas proposed terms that Israel's not going to accept. In turn, Israel has posed terms that Hamas is not really going to accept. The sides are going to meet in Cairo on Tuesday. Again, tomorrow there's going to be a meeting between Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. So maybe there'll be some breakthrough there. But really what we're talking about now is the sides are the United States is just trying to get the two sides to sit down together and talk. That's all they hope for. After that, they hope that they'll get somewhere. But that's really the optimism in the United States.
Mr. Burstein, I had briefly touched upon this earlier in the first question. I just wanted to bring it up again. Now, France has delivered a written proposal to Beirut to end hostilities with Israel. Hezbollah has rejected any de-escalation talks until the war in Gaza continues. Now, we've heard that sentiment on that statement earlier from different fronts. Houthis say the same. We will continue to attack all the vessels in the Red Sea until the war continues. Hamas has also mentioned, of course, they will not negotiate until the war continues. Hezbollah is repeating the same thing. Do you find this heading in any direction at the moment, even if France continues to make efforts there, at least with Lebanon?
Hezbollah has proven that they do not want to enter into a full-scale war with Israel. They have had lots of opportunities to launch a campaign, to do cross-border insurgencies. They want to be seen as supporting Hamas, but they want to do that with a very low-level escalations. Israel, in turn, has also not launched a full-scale war against Lebanon, but a lot of people are growing concerned that if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, Netanyahu, in order to preserve his government, needs to show that the war is going on, may launch a war into Lebanon. And that's really the big fear. The Lebanese government desperately does not want a war. So what we have here is we have the United States, France, Lebanon, who clearly do not want a war. Then you have Hezbollah, who says, or at least shows, that they don't want a full-out war, but they're also not willing to stop the ongoing fighting until the ceasefire in Gaza. And then you have the situation in Israel where on the one hand the country is openly saying we're willing to have a diplomatic solution. So Israel's open to a diplomatic solution. It has not fully said what it's going to accept. Originally it wanted Hezbollah pushed north 40 kilometers from the border. This current proposal is 10 kilometers. Israel hasn't accepted that. So even if Hezbollah were to one day say, yes, we're okay with that, Israel has not accepted that yet. So I think the ultimate answer is that it does all lie with what's happening in Gaza. That doesn't mean that there will not be a resolution until the war in Gaza ends, but it's based on what happens in Gaza. Will Israel agree to also accept a diplomatic solution in Lebanon, or is Israel going to say, okay, the war is going on, so now there's going to be dealing with Hezbollah instead of Hamas? That is going to be the real question.
All right, that was Mr. Alen Burin joining us from California right here on World DNA. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Let's shift our focus now. Cairo has hit back at a top Israeli minister. Now on Monday, Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, claimed Cairo has considerable responsibility for Hamas's October 7th attack.
Well, Egypt's foreign ministry condemned Smotrich's remarks and dubbed them disgraceful and irresponsible. According to Israeli public broadcaster Kan, Smotrich said during a meeting of his religious Zionist party that Egyptians bear considerable responsibility for October 7th. Smotrich claimed that much of Hamas armaments pass through Egypt, which shares a border with Gaza and has been a key mediator in efforts to end the fighting.
Egyptian Foreign Ministry spokesman said it was unfortunate and disgraceful for the Israeli minister to continue releasing irresponsible and inflammatory statements aimed at Egypt, and said that, I'm quoting here, Egypt fully controls its territory and does not allow any party to involve Egypt's name in failed attempts to justify its own shortcomings.
Now, just to give you a bit of a recap here, remember in 1979, Egypt became the first Arab nation to sign a peace treaty with Israel and has long served as a mediator in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Along with Qatar, it helped broker a week-long truce in November last year that saw the release of hostages in exchange for prisoners held by Israel and more aid deliveries into Gaza.
And rising instances of settler violence by Israel's extremists in the West Bank is drawing international condemnation.
Well, after the United States sanctioned 4 people for human rights abuses, this is what happened. Now, the United Kingdom has also followed suit, claiming that the violence has reached unprecedented levels.
Now, since the October 7th Hamas attacks, Israeli settler extremism, it's increased in the West Bank. The UK Foreign Ministry said sanctions have been imposed against the Moshe Sharvit and Yenon Levy, who threatened to displace Palestinian communities. Also sanctioned Azwi Bar Yosef, who set up an illegal outpost in the West Bank in 2018, and Eli Fideman, involved in multiple incidents against Palestinian shepherds in the South Hebron Hills. The sanctions include a UK asset freeze and a travel as well as a visa ban.
Announcing the curbs, British Foreign Secretary David Cameron said that Israel must take stronger action to stop the Israeli settler violence in West Bank, adding that by attacking Palestinian civilians, extremists are undermining the security for both Israelis and Palestinians. He also criticized Israel for not following through on commitments.
Earlier, US President Joe Biden had also signed an executive order on the 1st of February, sanctioning 4 individuals under accusations of undermining security and stability in the West Bank. The sanctions are a first by the US administration.
The move has drawn heavy criticism from the Israeli Prime Minister, who said that the exceptional measures were not necessary and that the overwhelming majority of West Bank settlers are law-abiding citizens.
In fact, according to an Axios report, Netanyahu protested and criticized Biden's order during a phone call with the US president. Netanyahu told Biden he does not understand the decision to issue the executive order when there's been a decrease in the number of attacks by settlers.
Netanyahu also said that the Israeli government has taken serious steps to tackle violence by extremist settlers, including issuing several administrative detention orders. While Canada is also mulling similar sanctions, an EU effort to impose sanctions on Israeli settlers attacking Palestinians in the West Bank has stalled. Hungary and the Czech Republic, the 2 staunch allies of Israel, said they are not ready to allow the proposal to go forward.
Now, US Vice President Kamala Harris said she's ready for presidency.
Well, the remarks come amid concerns over President Joe Biden's age. In an interview to the Wall Street Journal, Harris said she is ready to serve and that there's no question about it.
This was over a question about convincing voters of her leadership. Harris said that those who see her work are fully aware of her capacity to lead. Harris gave this interview just days before a special counsel report stoked renewed questions about Biden's age and mental aptitude.
Special counsel Robert Hur decided against bringing charges against the president over his mishandling of classified documents. But his report on the probe called Biden an elderly man with a poor memory. Biden, Harris and the White House came out in the president's defense. A trio of House committees investigating President Biden are now asking the Justice Department to turn over transcripts and recordings of his interviews with Special Counsel Robert Hur.
Now, following the release of the report, they asked for the information by February 19th. Some GOP leaders have been critical of Justice Department's alleged favorable treatment to Biden.
The report, however, added fuel to concerns over the re-election bid of the 81-year-old current president of the United States. Polls conducted after the special counsel's report was released found that 86% of Americans think Biden's too old to serve in office again. 59-year-old Harris has previously said that she is prepared to be president of the United States if needed.
And for more on this, we earlier spoke to our correspondent Susan Terani, who tells us how popular Kamala Harris is if she does have to replace Biden.
In recent months, Vice President Kamala Harris has taken a more prominent role in the Biden administration, notably on abortion rights. As she tours the country campaigning, she's become the administration's lead messenger on abortion rights. It's one of the few issues that Democrats have an advantage going into the 2024 presidential elections. However, with concerns about President Joe Biden's age and mental acuity, her readiness to serve as commander-in-chief is now under scrutiny. She responded strongly during a recent interview with the Wall Street Journal, saying that she's ready to serve. Despite this, Democrats within her own party have reservations about her place on the ticket, and Republicans are expected to use her readiness as a line of attack.
Now, former U.S. President Donald Trump is back at the Supreme Court pressing his claim of total immunity from criminal prosecution over the Capitol Hill riots on the 6th of January.
Now, this comes 4 days after justices heard arguments in his quest to be restored at the Colorado ballot. And according to reports, Trump's legal team has filed an emergency appeal with the court on Monday. His team is also pestering to delay his criminal trials until after the 2024 presidential elections.
The ex-president seeks to have the 4 federal charges against him dropped. Last week, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Trump is not shielded from prosecution on federal charges that he conspired to remain in power after the 2020 presidential polls. Trump claims that his actions were protected by presidential immunity. Moreover, his lawyers claim that he should not be tried during election campaign. The apex court will now decide if it will put the ruling on hold to allow Trump for an appeal. However, if the court declines to put the ruling on pause, the federal trial will be scheduled likely within the next 2 months. It is expected now that the Supreme Court will uphold the lower court's decision.
Now, being the frontrunner in the 2024 presidential elections, Trump faces 3 other criminal cases in addition to this one. This includes charges in Georgia for an alleged attempt to overturn the 2020 election results in the state, handling of confidential documents after he left the White House, and the alleged concealment of a payment to an adult star, Stormy Daniels. However, Trump has denied wrongdoing in all of these cases.
Now, the Russia-Ukraine war is it's going to start its 3rd year, marking its 2nd anniversary, and things are looking bad for Kiev. The Russian forces are pummeling the Ukrainian positions.
And now a stark warning comes from a European nation. Norway warns that Russians are now in a much stronger position than they were a year ago. Presenting its annual risk report along with other Norwegian security services, the head of the military intelligence unit said Kyiv would need extensive Western military aid to turn the tide. He emphasized that Moscow can mobilize approximately 3 times more troops than Ukraine.
With the new armed forces leadership in place, Ukraine soldiers find themselves on the defense across the eastern front line. Various reports over the weekend paint a picture of the Russian military continuing to throw large numbers of men into battle and even stepping up further use of drones, which are now key weapons on the battlefield.
Now, Avdiivka to the northwest of Donetsk city and Kharkiv have been the prime targets. The visuals on your screens right now are from last weekend. A Russian drone attack killed at least 7, including 3 children. The attack triggered blazes and damaged infrastructure and residential areas as well.
Russian military is gaining a slow but steady feat inside Avdiivka. This is similar to the way the forces closed in on Bakhmut. So with Russia's presidential election just a few weeks away, it's possible that capture has taken on even greater value.
And as the war rages on, along with Denmark and the Netherlands, Norway has agreed to provide Ukraine with the F-16 fighter jets Kyiv requested from its allies. The United States has been Kyiv's main military donor since Russia's invasion in February 2022, but the United States Congress has so far failed to agree on new aid. And with that, time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. When we get back, Indonesia is set to hold presidential polls on February 14th. It will host the biggest single-day election in the world on a Wednesday. Who is set to become Indonesia's next president? We will get you more on the other side. Keep watching. This is World DNA.
India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
On the next episode of World of Africa, several hundred people demonstrate across different cities in Senegal following the postponement of the country's presidential election scheduled for February 25th, as President Macky Sall's ruling party Alliance for the Republic called for dialogue. A California museum returns 7 royal artifacts to Ghana's traditional Ashanti king to commemorate his silver jubilee in the first planned handovers of Ashanti treasures looted during colonial times. And an innovative firm in Kenya is gaining funds by turning waste from the pineapple's harvest into footwear. The fashion industry is embracing more eco-friendly materials. World of Africa, at these times only on WION. World is one.
What if you catch a cold or flu and no drug is able to cure it?
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
From New York, we get you to the sandy shores of Durban, where I'll bring you all the glitz, glam, and happenings from the world of showbiz.
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation. Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. So far on the show, we've covered what's happening in West Asia. Of course, Israel adamant on continuing with its ground operations in Gaza and particularly Rafah at this point. This while international mediation efforts continue to bring about some sort of a truce deal between Israel and Hamas. What happens on that front, that remains to be seen.
US remains extremely hopeful that they are aiming for a minimum 6-week ceasefire, and it will hopefully come true. Now, apart from that, US Vice President Kamala Harris has said that she's ready for the US presidency amid concerns over Joe Biden's age. Of course, we are tracking this and a lot more right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the headlines.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to arrive in the U.A.E. later today on an official visit. He will attend the inauguration of the BAPS temple and participate in the government summit.
Security tightened at Delhi borders in view of the Farmers' March. Talks between government and farmer leaders on Monday night. Union Minister Arjun Manda assures government wants to reach at a solution.
President Joe Biden says the United States is working to negotiate a ceasefire of at least 6 weeks in the Gaza Strip. That will also include release of hostages. The comments were made after meeting Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House.
Former US President Donald Trump remains defiant on controversial NATO remarks, says he only made the defense grouping stronger.
Sources tell WION that Nawaz Sharif's PMLN offered the Prime Minister position to Bilawal Bhutto's PPP with the caveat that the PMLN will take on some key ministries. Which ministries? Those are yet to be defined.
Mexico Armed Forces bust the largest meth laboratory in recent times. The Navy seized 4.13 metric tons of meth and additional chemicals used to make the drug.
Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes makes the traditional trip to Disneyland a day after leading the Kansas City Chiefs to their second straight title with a win over San Francisco 49ers in Las Vegas. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will kick off his West Asia tour later today.
Well, he will be visiting the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. This will be the Prime Minister's third UAE visit in the last 8 months and 7th since 2015.
Now, during his 2-day stay in the UAE, the Prime Minister will hold bilateral meetings with the UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the Prime Minister will also participate in the World Government Summit, which he is attending as the guest of honor.
But of course, the key highlight of his visit, apart from the high-level diplomatic interactions, the inauguration of the BAPS temple in Abu Dhabi will be the key highlight of Prime Minister's visit. PM Modi will inaugurate the first traditional Hindu stone temple of the region on the 14th of February. The temple sits on 27 acres of land that was gifted by the UAE leadership.
The Prime Minister will also address the Indian community in the UAE at the Alhan Modi event in Abu Dhabi, and the event, for which over 65,000 people have registered, will take place later today. The UAE hosts over 3.5 million Indians who make up 35% of its population.
Prime Minister Modi will travel to Qatari capital Doha on February 14th after concluding his 2-day visit to the UAE. The announcement of PM Modi's visit to Qatar came a day after Doha released 8 jailed former Indian Navy personnel. 7 of them returned to India on Monday morning. As Indonesia heads into a presidential election tomorrow on the 14th of February, TikTok has emerged as a massive influence for both political campaigns and smear campaigns in the nation.
With a base of 125 million users, and growing. Let's just take a look at how the site is changing political tides ahead of the polls.
These Indonesian women are trying to promote presidential candidate Prabowo Subianto on TikTok. It's a platform all three candidates have gravitated towards as they try to reach the country's millions of young voters ahead of the February 14th election. TikTok has 125 million users in Indonesia and has become the country's second most used source of information on politics after television, according to pollster Indicator Politik Indonesia. Fazan Habib is a social media campaigner for Subianto.
The cute dance is quite viral because it was introduced and even done by Mr. Prabowo himself. And it turns out that the public loves it. As it seems nowadays, people prefer a happy campaign model, which includes dancing.
Subianto's rivals, Anies Baswedan and Ganjar Pranowo, have also ramped up their presence on the app, answering questions during live streams or sharing videos of heartfelt encounters with voters. But experts say TikTok is also flooded with problematic content that attempts to manipulate young voters. Enda Truastuti is a communications researcher at the University of Indonesia. She says many young voters may not be aware that Subianto has been forced to deny allegations of human rights abuses during his time as Special Forces commander.
Youth who are targets of this rebranding do not have a grasp of the historical and political context within Prabowo's political ecosystem. This is consistent with narratives on TikTok, such as, if he did violate human rights, why was he never jailed?
Manipulated images and deepfake videos of the candidates have also circulated widely. TikTok says on its website its policy is to remove harmful misinformation and work with fact-checkers to flag or debunk it. Political ads and fundraising are banned. Nearly 205 million people are registered to vote as the world's third largest democracy heads to the polls on Wednesday.
Let's now take a look at all the developments from the world of technology. And as Valentine's Day approaches, a new report reveals a surge in romance scams in India.
According to the report, 66% of Indians have been a victim of online dating scams. In 2023, 43% of Indians experienced AI voice scams, out of which 83% of them lost money. Now, the report highlighted that scammers blend traditional tactics like manipulation with advanced tech like generative AI and deepfakes. Scammers exploit AI to create convincing personas that often impersonate celebrities, and the scammers mostly target older individuals, particularly widowed or those with memory loss. These scams frequently originate on platforms like Facebook. Experts stress the importance of being cautious of requests for money from new connections online.
Engineers at MIT have developed a small ultrasound sticker to monitor organ stiffness. The sticker is the size of a postage stamp and can detect signs of disease in organs. A study explored the medical device, detailing how the sensor sends sound waves through skin that reflects off organs. Patterns of reflected waves show organ rigidity tracked by the sticker. It continuously monitors organ stiffness, detecting disease progression over 48 hours. The device could detect early signs of liver failure in lab tests conducted on rats. Researchers also aim to adapt it for human use, envisioning ICU application post-organ transplants. Researchers also see the device's potential for early tumor diagnosis and intervention.
Google has pledged nearly $27 million to aid Europeans in learning artificial intelligence. The tech giant announced the funding, inviting social enterprises and non-profits to apply. They aim to assist those most likely to benefit from AI training and will conduct growth academies for companies scaling with AI. Google has expanded its free online AI training courses to 18 languages. Adrian Brown from the Center for Public Impact emphasized the importance of addressing existing inequalities that AI could exacerbate.
And this is Alicia Framis. Alicia is all set to marry Alex, that's an AI-generated hologram. Once married, Alicia will become the first woman in the world to have a virtual husband. A Barcelona-based artist, Alicia is known for experimental works, and the wedding is part of her latest project called The Hybrid Couple, which tries to explore the relationship between humans and AI. Created using holographic technology and machine learning, Alex's personality is based on characteristics of Alicia's previous partners, and the wedding ceremony will take place this summer at a museum in Rotterdam, Netherlands. Alicia is no stranger to living with non-human beings. In 1996, in fact, Alicia lived with a mannequin named Pierre.
All right, over to business next. Easing inflation optimism has traders increasing their bets that the US central bank will act on its pivot to rate cuts sooner than expected.
Now, the US inflation rate has been on a downward trend in recent months. That has fueled hopes that the Federal Reserve would be more amenable to cutting interest rates in the months to come. Take a look at our next report to understand the changing dynamics of Fed easing bets.
January saw a 3.7% year-over-year increase in the core consumer price index. That reading was the smallest annual increase since April 2021. Core consumer price data is a strong indicator of underlying inflation as it does not include volatile food and fuel. This highlights the progress that the Fed has achieved in containing inflation. Economists expect Tuesday's data to reveal retail inflation rose less than 3%. If so, it will mark the first time below that reading in over 2 years. Officials have recognized the improvement. However, they've been hesitant to suggest rate cuts could come as early as next month. Their calm demeanor stems from several positive economic indicators, the most prominent of which is the robust job market data. In the days after the inflation data, investors will listen to Fed members talk to predict when rates will be slashed. What is bolstering easing inflation views is the OECD's latest expectations. The OECD report showed global inflation is expected to recede faster in most economies compared to its previous estimates. The prediction showed annual revision confirmed US inflation is on a downward trend. But the global body wants central banks to be cautious in declaring victory over inflation too soon. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Crypto stablecoin investments are making regulators nervous. Stablecoins are crypto tokens whose value is typically pegged to a currency such as the US dollar. Take a look at this next report to understand the risks of stablecoin investments.
For traders looking for a mechanism to store or transfer funds without dealing with banks, stablecoins provide a convenient alternative to more volatile cryptocurrencies. There are several ways stablecoins mimic traditional currencies. The most common is to back their coin's value with real assets, like cash or government bonds. When Silicon Valley Bank collapsed in March last year, stablecoin USDC went through panic when its 8% reserve value was held by the bankrupt bank. During the dramatic weekend, while authorities deliberated SVB's fate, traders rushed to sell, sending the price down below $1. After the government stepped in to make all of the bank's depositors whole, USDC's price recovered. The crisis showed how stablecoins can be buffeted by troubles in the traditional financial world. That interconnectedness continues as the cryptomania that peaked in 2022 is returning. One reason for the interest, stablecoins use blockchain ledgers, which can allow issuers to enter new areas such as cross-border payments. Another, there's money on the table. Thanks to the Federal Reserve's rate hikes, stablecoin issuers can collect yields of more than 4% by investing in U.S. Treasuries and other traditional financial instruments. Stablecoins have seen numerous runs. The markets for the assets that support stablecoins would take a hit if investors fled in such a panic. Additionally, crypto tokens pose the risk of fundamentally altering the nature of the monetary system. Stablecoins have the potential to eat into bank deposits, which lenders rely on for low-cost lending. Such investments are making regulators nervous. A white paper by officials at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in September said stablecoins are like money market funds. The authors pointed out that investors ran away from money markets funds. When it comes to transparency, stablecoin issuers are often seen as lacking. Those risks are making officials jittery on stablecoins. Bureau Report, WION World is One.